making that easier, and I guess some of the tools you're seeing that are helping with that, because those are complex.
There's a lot of really interesting things that are coming out about supportive technology for all the clouds. Now, when it comes to infrastructure as code, Azure's got its own built-in thing, like a lot of the clouds do now. We know Amazon's CloudFormation, and I always found that to be a little unwieldy. I really didn't like the format. It just was me. And I think the reason I didn't like the format is I didn't like the XML markup and all that stuff. Just wasn't for me. But when I started seeing ARM, Azure Resource Manager, and the templating system, I really started understanding what they were trying to do. And ARM became a little bit more understandable to me. And so that was a really great way of starting to comprehend how infrastructure as code, or almost anything as code on Azure, started to work, because it's all just JSON templates and scripts to deploy it, PowerShell, you name it. But then the third-party vendors who have incredibly robust and extensible products like Pulumi and Terraform are out there, and they're making it much simpler for our users to build, because they're using common languages across any cloud. And that becomes an advantage for the user. So being able to build something in Terraform that works on Azure, and then being able to take some of the same logic, but then modifying it to another cloud, gives you that strength. And that's why you see, like I said, the Pulumis, the Terraforms, and of course, Ansible. These are kind of agnostic tools. And to a point, Kubernetes is too. It's just about how you manage it. And so we're seeing all these like really useful platforms that make it simpler to build infrastructure and to codify it all using almost any of the big major tools.
Tell me about the Floby model of DevOps.
I think I lost you on sound. Give me 1 second. Can I hear you? Now I can hear you.
Good, we did not lose you. So tell me a little bit about your theory, your descriptor of the Floby model of DevOps, because I think that it leads nicely into, managing infrastructure.
Sure. So I like to talk about this thing, and it's just a silly idea. I call what a lot of companies like to do, and Kubernetes included, the Floby model. So I can't really talk about it that much anymore, but I used to have hair. Like a lot of people, we have hair. And if you remember what a Floby was, it was this vacuum product that allowed you to cut your own hair at home. Now, sure, you saved a few bucks on your haircut long term, and you made a decision that you want to be the person in charge of how your haircut looks. But what do you do when you screw it up? You can't have you didn't go to a beauty school or a barber school or whatever a beautician's academy, whatever they call them nowadays. You didn't go to one of these places. You don't have the experience of making the changes to be able to bring you to a place where you look good. So a lot of times in technology, we think we can build it ourselves. We think that if we understand every single nook and cranny of some bespoke system, that we have a greater knowledge of it. But to be honest with you, a lot of times it's a lot of bad haircuts. And that's what I've gotten from like talking to people about this Floby model, is that all that technical debt is just people sometimes trying to force the issue rather than making use of services that are really beneficial to them long term. And so I like to look at a lot of the modern managed Kubernetes services as helping people avoid bad haircuts. Because rather than building a bunch of nodes and then figuring out whether the scheduler is sending things to the pods correctly or not, you could much easily choose Azure Kubernetes service or anybody else's managed Kubernetes cluster service that really reduces all that potential for bad haircuts. And so that's kind of what I really think. The Flowbee model was really useful for people. Rack stack, put it in the data center, or just spin up a bunch of VMs and get things working. But, you know, that doesn't really scale. A Flowbee doesn't scale. It's going to look bad. And so you're better off using that expertise.
And I think your corollary, or our corollary, was not only do you want to avoid a bad haircut or a bad do-it-yourself infrastructure as code, but you want to accelerate innovation, reliability, and look for good pricing models as well too. So I think that was your upside of it.
And by doing everything on your own, you're not necessarily making use of all the advantages of pulling management into your solution. And so I like to think a lot about database reliability. And database reliability is a whole other conversation that I think that a lot of us don't have. We think about databases as these giant monolithic things that we just pull data out and we modify it, we add data in, but we still need to add a certain level of reliability. And I can think about Charity Majors and the book she wrote years ago that put an SRE spin on databases as well. And so all of these things nowadays being put into services as opposed to running them yourself are avoiding a lot of the big overhead problems that we saw. And I want to talk about the one thing that a lot of us really hate having a conversation about. It's backups. So database reliability starts with your backups. Reliability of any major system begins with your backups and your ability to return to some form. And when I say backups, I'm also talking about your disaster recovery. I'm talking about your DR site or how you actually move it to business continuity. When you look at a lot of the managed platforms of managed databases, these things are thought about for you. And so I think that the more we use these services as opposed to building them ourselves, we're going to have way more reliability. And so that's in our databases, that's in our application servers, that's in all the supportive systems, networks, you name it, you know.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, please, about, you know, is Azure one mature? Is it as mature as the other guys? More mature? Does it have a long way to go? Do you guys see a roadmap for improvements? How you guys are looking at that?
I can only speak on my opinion, and that's the best I can give. Is the maturity level I think is tremendous, because of the multifaceted way of being able to manage it. So not just having to rely on Portal, but having Portal, having API, having a CLI tool, having integrated tools with a Cloud Shell right in there. I think that what we've done is provided a very, very mature and friendly to enterprise workspace, while also really recognizing that people in smaller and open source communities need simple tools to deploy with. So one of the great things that I like to think about is Visual Studio Code and how much Azure is directly integrated into Visual Studio Code, and what an advantage that really is for us as an organization. When you think about right click to deploy, or now I can go and spin up and I did this today. So I was in a meeting with of someone today, and we were trying to come up with the best deployment plan for a little app that we're working on. And so what do? We found the deployment center option within Azure Web Apps, which set up a CI/CD pipeline along with going right to the repository the code was in and deploying it with just me doing 3 clicks. I just provided the branch that I wanted to deploy, and then it set up a continuous integration pipeline that did all my build tests and everything, and then sent everything and deployed it right to my app service. And that app service is a very, very simple tool. But if you think about it, the advantage that you give to someone to deploy an API right from their VS Code, or deploy a major like static site, because you can deploy a static site right to like a storage blob, and that storage blob is going to cost you $2 a month most of the time. So all these things, they're just making it easier because of the maturity level. Microsoft's been a customer focused company, whether it's consumer level or enterprise level. It's what we do. And so I think that a lot of that thoughtfulness came into building Azure.
I knew once you started talking about Visual Studio, we were going to get at least one question. So this question is the future of integration between developers and Visual Studio and DevOps and Azure. That's a big question, but it's coming from a guy who spent a lot of time with Visual Studio and wants to make his life as a platform engineer a lot easier.
Well, I think that the great thing about VS Code is that for years, people were struggling to get tool sets to work all together. Having one thing for all your purposes. So I can tell you, if you're a DevOps engineer, and I hate that term, but it is what it is. We all use it nowadays. The fact that you've got VS Code with all the integrated tools for the cloud extensions for Azure, along with a terminal to do simple, code base. So if you want to do things with kubectl, you can do it right in the terminal. And so VS Code has set that up. And then the integration directly into Azure DevOps. So it's silly that it's called Azure DevOps, but when you think about it, it literally is Azure providing DevOps tooling to you. So that also isn't just the idea of it's setting up CI/CD pipelines. So it's setting up Kanban boards and allowing you to create sprints or individual stories so that your agile process and your long-term planning, your story points, all those things, it's in a singular place that's eventually directly attached to both VS Code in a way by being able to modify PRs that are attached to VS Code from Azure DevOps, and then being able to deploy by going and triggering things via a Git update, which then eventually triggers a CI/CD process and deploys your application. So I think like the future is this great interconnection between all the tools, having them all being simpler for a person that's literally just writing code. How do they get that code deployed? How do they get that code tested? All that stuff being built right into VS Code, especially now with code spaces for GitHub, like you're talking about just a tremendous advantage, not just for Microsoft in the competitive market, but a tremendous advantage just to developers and engineers alike.
All right, I want to put it out to the group. Any other questions out there? So far, it's been very informative, but I'm wondering if anyone else has any questions. Don't want to keep anyone else from offering something up.
I'm mostly curious, like, where are you all deploying to nowadays? If you're using one of the cloud services, which cloud are you using, and is there one big advantage you've seen, or if there's a reason you just haven't used Azure yet? Just ask me. Like, what do you think is a difference you'd like to see, kind of a gap closed?
Well, we have done several deployments at customers with Azure. Mm-hmm. So that, when I first started the company several years ago, it was all about AWS. And sure. a few people on here, early in their careers, their job was to move applications to AWS. And I thought it was always going to be about AWS. But lately, and I mean 6 months, in our customer base, which are kind of mid-size and larger organizations, there's some startups, but the startups seem very focused on AWS. I get requests for Azure expertise. The customers, one, are already Microsoft customers, have Microsoft skill sets, need some supplemental help, in details, in newer features, in DevOps processes. So they call us because what I've seen is you're not on your own with Microsoft and Azure. There's a lot of support. Pricing's good. I know you don't talk about pricing. You told me once they show up with a check or a bag of money to my apartment. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, if you show up with a pail of hundreds and say, Jay, I need some Azure, I'd say, go to the bank. I mean, I don't know what to do with it, but what I can tell you to do is that um, the options to make it easy for people are tremendous. We've got a global sales team, obviously, and a team of architecture people, integration, customer success, all these like giant layers on this tremendous organization that is so focused on making sure that customers can really innovate. You know, the big term that came out of some of the big Microsoft events last year was like invent with purpose. And I think that that term really lands with me because I think that people sometimes build a bunch of technology. They force redundancy, they force all these things into it, and there's not a lot of purpose behind that. And I think that what we do is give you so many tools to do things um, the right way. And it all kind of starts with our documentation. And that documentation is what helps people do things the right way. So like I said, the global support that you have from the docs team to and the docs team that we have is huge. The amount of people that just work on documentation around every single major product at Microsoft is just unbelievable. And I think that the other part of it is that there's this global community that has been part of the MVP culture of Microsoft. And the MVP, you know, has been around for a very long time. And so the MVPs gravitated also to Azure as they moved from traditional data center deployments and, you know, the Office closet to moving to the cloud, because a lot of the things that they knew became just as usable to them. The familiarity was there. And like I said, starting with things like Azure AD, it's just, you knew what you were getting into and you knew the people that you were working with were going to be there to help.
So I can't let you off the hook so easy with innovation. What do you mean by innovating with Azure? Because is it innovating within the platform to make things more efficient?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like when I say like Azure DevOps, imagine being an organization that's been traditionally deploying code through scripts, not necessarily understanding the way of using um, DevOps practices, and so being able to like build things quicker because you're now innovating around CI CD with Azure DevOps. You're building sprints and using things. So that's just one of the things. When I say innovate around Azure, the tooling is made for people to succeed. And that success leads to innovation, whether you're going to deploy things in a new way, you're going to build code more effectively because you're using tools like VS Code and you're using all the linting that's coming along with VS Code. I think Azure is just giving people, and all the tools, especially the development tools, uh, it's just really big. And you look at products like, or projects like Helm, and the amount of work that's coming from Microsoft as well around that. Like there's all these things that we're contributing to, whether it's the product itself in Azure or open source projects around some of the supportive things like Helm and Kubernetes, that makes us just a great place to work because you can get all the right tooling, get all the right answers, and all the reliability to keep it all up.
Well, great. I'll put one last call for questions out.
Hey, Sumit, nice to see you. Sumit is one of my partners in DevOps Days New York City. We organized that conference. We've done it together now for the last 2 years. It's a really great opportunity for people in New York City, and I really do hope we we got to host the conference literally submit like a week before the whole country went on lockdown.
I think if we didn't have it on a Tuesday and Wednesday and it was on Thursday and Friday, we wouldn't have been able to host it.
Yeah.
I think we were just on the right side of the week to host it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the city started shutting down within days. And so we had a lot of great things that happened. I think one of the best that I noticed was like we got John Allspaw to do a 5-minute talk.
Wow.
And, you know, that in itself was, I felt like a real success.
Yeah, I mean, and also, Jay, on that, John being in the open spaces, which is the huge piece of DevOps Days, he was such a phenomenal person and his team to have in those open spaces to actually be engaging with. I think in one of those open spaces we had about 100 people. Yeah, and I mean there was obviously other great speakers from the DevOps community.
Oh yeah, Yana Dugan. Like Yana Dugan was incredible. So many smart people. And then the attendees. Now we were really concerned due to the health crisis that we weren't going to get a lot of people, and we didn't get what our expected was. But the people that attended were so engaged, and like getting an opportunity to sit next to John Allspaw and just bullshit about your problems. He's gonna listen, and he's gonna really appreciate the fact that you came to him with them. And that's what the benefit of open spaces and DevOps Days. And the DevOps community, I really want to say, and I like to say this a lot, we're more than pipelines. We're more than keeping your website up. We're a community of people that really do care about good communication, great practices, and empathy.
There's a big cultural aspect to it. Culture, leadership.
Yeah, and I mean, Larry hosts the meetup, and Brian's on as well at Barclays. He hosts it every month when we used to do it in person. And yesterday we had Brian from Walmart talk about continuous.
Very nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, we did the Fireside last time with him, but we also did the meetup presentation yesterday. And I think what you're talking about in terms of the cultural aspects and not being about pipelines, even though he was talking about continuous delivery, it was so much about the team aspect of doing continuous delivery and the communication. And that came out in the lean coffee that we did afterwards, which is the format for Larry's meetup, is we do the presentation followed by the lean coffee style discussion.
Very cool. That's one of the great things that we've seen come out of this community too. We're noticing that people really like having these meta conversations about what we're building. We don't need to necessarily talk about the code or the tools that we use, but we talk about the things that we do to get people enabled to use them. We talk about the things that help people communicate better. So it's not just Slack, it's the stand-up. Why do we have the stand-up? What's the format? Who we talk to during this? How do teams work? So the DBA team, how is it embedded with the DevOps group or the systems group or the SRE groups? All these are critical. And if you go back to things like the DevOps handbook, it's kind of the cornerstone.
We did get a couple questions in since you brought it up, but it's the other side of DevOps. Mm-hmm. What tools does Azure supply to build secure coding practices into the CI/CD pipeline? We did talk about pipelines.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'll be honest with you. That's a tough one, but I will tell you, security services have been a real big advancement at Azure. I was reading through the Azure Sentinel product. Now, secure coding, I can't answer, but I can tell you about logging
of security incidents. That I can, and that's Azure Sentinel is a tool that allows people to get real-time auditing around all security incidents and to be able to log those, and I suppose lead to a more secure code base. There's other tools that we're using. Aqua Security is a partner of Microsoft Azure, and it's something that you can easily turn on for your container images. So let's say you have an old NPM module that's part of it. That NPM module can be exploited to do Bitcoin mining. This can do a scan of your image, find that NPM module, and recommend that you upgrade it before you deploy. Also is the ability to recognize, just in GitHub, when you've accidentally committed a string with a piece of authentication in it. So one of the cool things is that if you go to GitHub and you provide a Microsoft key for, say, Cosmos DB, there's tooling around GitHub that works with Azure that will recognize the specific string. It knows what the connection string looks like. It knows exactly the format. It will scan it and it'll let you know, hey buddy, you committed a key. You better purge that from the Git history and remove it from the file. So I think that we're doing things to help people act more secure when they deploy. And so I think those are the tools that are really useful.
And another one in my little sweet spot. Tell us more about what Azure is offering, or what a lot of customers are using. We happen to have an open source tool that does this. Performance monitoring post-releases.
Sure. Azure Insights is a full suite of monitoring and metrics. Every single major tool around Azure has some sort of metrics built into it and a way to view those metrics. There are like individual workbenches, if you will, that are created with all the data specifically from your application insights. So it's giving you like APM kind of level information. It's giving you performance metrics of the infrastructure, and it's allowing you to do all those things right from the portal. The other thing that I really like are the fact that you can embed these also into your Kubernetes processes. So you get information if you install something on your cluster to draw how your pod health is, your deployment health, find out how the nodes are doing. There's native without having to install anything, obviously. So there's a huge amount of tooling around there. And then there's the third parties, like your Datadogs, who are giving you great information. And then just because there's open APIs, people have the ability to just do what they want and build their own in. And it sounds like you've done that.
Yep. All right. Well, I know I've enjoyed our fireside chat today. I believe our community has. We very much appreciate Jay Gordon, no relation, you spending some time with us this afternoon. Did you want to wrap, and is there anything else you wanted to add? We loved hearing from you.
Hey, first of all, I hope you're all happy, healthy, and so are your families. I'm here in Manhattan, and I'm very lucky that I am healthy and happy. And I really appreciate the time that everyone shared with me here today. If you want to hear from me more and all my terrible opinions, you can go to my Twitter account. It's Jaydestro, Jaydestro. I'm sure Jared will share it another way somehow. But that's how you can follow up with me. If you have more questions about Azure, you have questions about life, liberty, in the pursuit of the New York Yankees, feel free to let me know, because I'll give you all the best information I can.
Great. Thank you. And thank you all for attending this afternoon. Much appreciated.
Catch you later next time, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jared.